Captain Elias Carter stepped off the landing platform, his boots pressing against the smooth white marble of the Valeri Empire's Grand Palace. The air smelled of something unfamiliar, a mix of flowers and a strange metallic scent. High above, golden towers reached into the sky, glowing under the twin suns of Val Thirax, the capital planet of the Valeri. A group of Valeri guards stood in perfect formation, their silver armor gleaming. Their eyes, a bright shade of violet, watched him with caution. They weren't used to humans here. Few outsiders were ever allowed to step foot inside the Empire's heart. Elias had been sent as Earth's official diplomat to negotiate a treaty, a rare opportunity that could change everything. A tall Valeri official stepped forward. He had an air of arrogance, as if speaking to Elias was beneath him. His dark robes, lined with symbols of power, flowed behind him as he bowed slightly. "Welcome to Val Thirax, Captain Carter," the official said, his voice smooth but distant. "I am Counselor Xelneris, representative of the Grand Imperial Court. We trust your journey was comfortable." Elias gave a polite nod. The hospitality of the Valeri Empire is impressive. Xelneris studied him for a moment before turning sharply. "Come, the Empress awaits." Elias followed, his eyes scanning the palace interior. The halls were massive, decorated with glowing crystals and ancient murals. Strange symbols, possibly depicting historical battles or legends, lined the walls. He noticed one painting in particular, a tall, cloaked figure standing before a burning planet. The Valeri had always claimed to be an ancient race, far older than humanity. But something about their history felt incomplete, as if they were hiding something. Finally, they reached the throne room. The chamber was enormous, with a high ceiling covered in golden patterns. At the center, on an elevated throne, sat Empress Valthora, ruler of the empire. She was as elegant as she was intimidating, her silver crown glowing faintly. Her piercing violet eyes locked onto Elias, as if trying to read his very soul. "You stand before the ruler of the Valeri," Xelneris announced. "Bow, human." Elias clenched his jaw but complied, offering a respectful nod. "Your Majesty, I bring greetings from the United Terran Council. I hope our meeting will bring prosperity to both our peoples." The Empress remained silent for a moment. Then her voice echoed through the chamber. "Your kind has ambition. That is both admirable and dangerous." Elias kept his expression neutral. "We seek peace, not conflict." She studied him carefully. "Then you must follow our ways. The Valeri do not give trust easily." Xelneris stepped forward. "As a sign of respect, there are rules you must obey during your stay. You are forbidden from leaving the diplomatic wing without escort. You may not enter restricted areas, and under no circumstances are you to approach the royal chambers." The last rule caught Elias's attention. Why such a specific restriction? It wasn't unusual for royalty to have private quarters, but the warning seemed unusually serious. "Understood," Elias said, keeping his curiosity hidden. The meeting continued for another hour, filled with polite words but little progress. The Valeri were cautious, their answers vague. They spoke of alliance but offered little in return. Elias knew they were testing him, seeing how much Earth was willing to give before they gave anything back. By the time he returned to his guest quarters, his mind was buzzing with questions. The royal chambers, why had they been mentioned so clearly? He had dealt with alien royalty before, but none had placed such emphasis on staying away from a particular room. As he sat on the edge of his bed, a soft chime echoed through the room. A holographic screen flickered to life, displaying an incoming message. "Unknown source. Help me." Elias stiffened. The words were brief, but they sent a chill down his spine. The message had no sender, no traceable origin. He quickly ran a security check. Nothing. It had somehow bypassed the Valeri's encrypted system, something that should have been impossible. Then, before he could react, another message appeared. "Unknown source. I know you can see this. Please, Before it's too late, come to the West Wing. The truth is not what you think. Elias's heart pounded. This was not part of the plan. Was this a trap? A test from the Velari? Or something far more dangerous? His instincts screamed at him to ignore it. The risks were too high. But deep down, another part of him, the part that had survived countless missions, the part that knew when something was wrong, told him this was important. Taking a deep breath, he made his decision. Slipping his sidearm into his jacket, he quietly stepped toward the door. Whatever was waiting for him in the West Wing, he had to find out. Elias moved silently through the palace corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. The message had been short, but it was enough to set off every instinct he had. Come to the West Wing. The truth is not what you think. Was this a trap, or had he just stumbled onto something far bigger than a simple diplomatic mission? The palace was quiet at this hour, the corridors dimly lit by glowing blue crystals embedded in the walls. Velari technology was strange, elegant but old, as if it had been perfected centuries ago and left unchanged. Elias reached the western hall, his boots making barely a sound on the smooth floor. Ahead, the path split into two directions. He hesitated. Which way? Then, as if answering his question, a door at the far end of the left hallway slid open slightly. A faint light spilled out. Someone had left it unlocked. Elias tightened his grip on the small energy pistol hidden beneath his jacket and stepped forward. Inside, the room was massive, filled with ancient artifacts and glowing symbols on the walls. The air was warm, carrying a strange, floral scent. At the center stood a large golden mirror, its surface shimmering like liquid. But it wasn't his reflection that caught his attention. It was the figure standing in front of it. She was Velari, but unlike any he had seen before. Her silver-white hair flowed down her back, glowing faintly in the dim light. She wore an intricate, deep blue robe that shimmered like the night sky. But it was her eyes that froze Elias in place. They weren't the usual violet of the Velari. They were human. Deep, rich brown, just like his own. The woman turned sharply, startled by his presence. For a moment, there was silence. Then, as their eyes met, shock spread across her face. "You?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Before Elias could speak, a sudden burst of energy crackled through the room. A golden force field flared between them, separating them instantly. The woman took a step back, her breathing rapid. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but there was no anger in her voice, only fear. Elias took a cautious step closer to the barrier. "Who are you?" She hesitated, looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. Then, with a deep breath, she answered, "I am Princess Cirrus Valthera." Elias's blood ran cold. The princess, the one no outsider had ever seen. And now, standing before him, she looked human. The shocking truth. Elias struggled to process what he was seeing. The Velari had always claimed to be an ancient, superior race, different from all others in the galaxy. But if the royal family itself looked human, then something wasn't right. "That's not possible," he said, his voice firm. "The Velari aren't human." Cirrus flinched, her fingers tightening at her sides. That's what they want everyone to believe. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. "You are human?" he asked slowly. She bit her lip, hesitating. Then, finally, she nodded. "Not just me. All of us. The Velari are descendants of an ancient human civilization, one that left Earth thousands of years ago." Elias felt his heart hammer against his ribs. "That's not true. There's no record." "They erased it," she interrupted. "They erased everything. The elders, the empress, they don't want the truth to be known. They built an empire on the belief that we are superior divine. If the galaxy knew we were once human, their rule would crumble." The pieces started falling into place. The secrecy, the fear of human influence, the forbidden rule about approaching the royal chambers. Ceres wasn't just a princess. She was proof that the Valeri Empire was built on a lie. The danger of knowing. Elias ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. If this was true, it changed everything. Earth wasn't just negotiating with an alien empire. It was unknowingly dealing with its lost brothers and sisters. But if the Valeri leadership had gone so far to bury this truth, they'll kill me for knowing this, won't they? Elias said. Ceres didn't answer, but her expression said enough. You need to leave, she urged. Right now, before they. A sudden alarm blared through the palace. Ceres's face paled. They knew. Elias turned toward the door just as it slid open violently. Valeri enforcers rushed in, their weapons raised. Step away from the princess, one of them shouted. Elias barely had a second to react. His instincts kicked in. Fight or die. He dived for cover, pulling his pistol from his jacket. A plasma shot sizzled past his head, burning into the wall behind him. Ceres raised her hand, and for the first time, Elias saw what made the Valeri truly terrifying. Energy crackled at her fingertips, raw and powerful. She wasn't just a princess, she was a warrior. The enforcers hesitated, clearly afraid of harming her. This is treason, one of them barked. Ceres's voice was cold. Then let me be a traitor. With a sharp motion, she released a wave of golden energy. The guards were thrown backward, crashing into the walls. Elias didn't wait. We need to go. Ceres grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a hidden passage behind the mirror. As the alarms echoed through the palace, Elias knew there was no turning back. He had uncovered the truth. And now, the entire Valeri Empire would be hunting him. Elias ran behind Princess Ceres as they slipped into the hidden passage behind a golden mirror. The walls of the tunnel were rough and dimly lit, a sharp contrast to the grand palace halls. The air was damp, carrying a faint metallic scent. The sound of alarms echoed above them, followed by the heavy footsteps of Valeri enforcers searching for them. They won't stop until they find us, Elias said, keeping his voice low. Ceres nodded, moving quickly. We need to reach the lower chambers. There's an old transport system that connects to the outer city. If we get there, we can escape. Elias had 100 questions running through his mind, but now wasn't the time. He followed her through the narrow tunnels, gripping his pistol tightly. Every moment they stayed here, the danger increased. Suddenly, Ceres stopped. She placed her hand against the wall, and a faint glow appeared beneath her palm. A hidden doorway slid open, revealing a dark chamber ahead. This way, she whispered. Elias hesitated. How do you know about these passages? Ceres glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Because I've been preparing for this moment my whole life. A secret buried in time. They stepped inside, and the door closed behind them, sealing them in darkness. Then, with a quiet hum, the room lit up. Elias's breath caught as he looked around. The chamber was ancient. Strange symbols and markings covered the walls, glowing faintly with blue energy. At the center, a large, circular platform stood, surrounded by floating metal discs displaying holograms of planets, ships, and Earth. This is a memory vault, Ceres explained, a place where forbidden knowledge is stored. Elias stepped forward, eyes scanning the holograms. He saw images of Earth's past, ancient civilizations, space exploration, wars, and Valeri ships watching from the shadows. They've been monitoring us, Elias murmured. For centuries. Ceres nodded. Long ago, our ancestors left Earth, believing they could build a perfect society among the stars. But as time passed, the rulers of the Valeri decided that returning to Earth, or even acknowledging our past, was too dangerous. They erased our history, convinced everyone that we were superior different. Elias clenched his fists. And now they rule through lies. Ceres met his gaze. Yes. Elias exhaled slowly. This changed everything. Humanity had never been alone in the galaxy, But instead of reuniting, the Valeri had hidden themselves, watching from the darkness. "Why are you telling me this?" Elias asked. Saris hesitated. "Because I believe the future of our people, both Valeri and humans, should not be built on deception. I want peace, but my mother, the empress, she will never allow it." Elias studied her. There was conviction in her voice, but also pain. She had been raised as a princess, but she had never truly been free. Before he could respond, the walls suddenly shook. A deep metallic thud echoed through the chamber. "They found us," Saris said, her voice urgent. The holograms flickered as the door exploded open. "The chase begins." A squad of Valerian forcers stormed in, weapons drawn. Their armor gleamed under the dim lights, and their violet eyes burned with intensity. "Princess, step away from the human," one of them commanded. Elias and Saris exchanged a glance. Running wasn't an option now. Saris raised her hand. Energy crackled at her fingertips, golden arcs dancing around her palm. The enforcers hesitated, clearly afraid of harming her. "This is your last warning," the lead enforcer barked. Saris didn't wait. With a sharp motion, she sent a pulse of golden energy across the room. The enforcers were blasted backward, crashing into the walls. Sparks flew as their weapons overloaded. Elias took his chance. He pulled his pistol and fired 2 quick shots. The stun blasts hit their targets, knocking 2 guards unconscious. "Move," Saris shouted. They bolted through the broken doorway, racing into another tunnel. Behind them, more enforcers gave chase, their footsteps pounding against the stone floor. A blast of energy sizzled past Elias's shoulder, barely missing him. "This would be a lot easier if they weren't trying to kill us," he muttered. Saris smirked despite the danger. "Welcome to my life." They turned a corner and reached a massive, circular chamber. At the center, a transport pod rested on a metal track. Saris ran to the control panel. "I can get it working, but I need a minute." Elias took cover behind a pillar, firing at the incoming guards. "You have 30 seconds." The guards spread out, using their own cover. The air filled with blasts of energy as the fight intensified. One enforcer threw a shock grenade, and Elias barely rolled away in time before it detonated, sending a pulse of electricity through the chamber. Saris slammed her hand against the panel. The transport pod roared to life. "Get in," she shouted. Elias didn't need to be told twice. He jumped into the pod just as Saris followed. The guards rushed forward, but it was too late. The pod launched forward at high speed, disappearing into the underground tunnels. The escape, for now. Elias exhaled, pressing his back against the metal seat. The hum of the transport pod was the only sound now. Saris sat across from him, breathing heavily. For the first time, Elias saw the exhaustion in her eyes. She had risked everything to escape. "So, what now?" Elias asked. Saris met his gaze. "Now we find a way off this planet." Elias nodded. He had come here for a diplomatic mission. Instead, he had uncovered a hidden history, a lost connection between Earth and the stars. And now, the Valeri Empire wanted him dead. But one thing was clear: humanity deserved the truth. As the pod sped through the tunnels, Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The transport pod rushed through the underground tunnels, its engines humming softly. The dim lights outside flickered as the pod sped forward, carrying Elias and Princess Saris far away from the palace. Elias sat across from Saris, gripping the seat's edge tightly. His mind was still racing from everything that had happened. The Valeri were human. Their entire empire was built on a lie. And now, because of this truth, both of them were fugitives. Saris took a deep breath, rubbing her temples. She looked exhausted. "We don't have much time," she said finally. "The empress will order the entire city to be locked down. The moment we step outside, we'll be hunted." Elias nodded. "Then we need to leave this planet. Do you have a ship?" Saris hesitated. "I have a contact." someone who can help, but getting to them won't be easy. Elias frowned. Who? She met his gaze. A rebel leader, someone who has been fighting against the empress for years. Elias raised an eyebrow. You're telling me that there's a rebellion against the Valeri Empire? Cirrus gave a small, tired smile. Not exactly. Most Valeri believe what they've been told their whole lives. But there are a few, very few, who know the truth, and they want change. Elias exhaled. Then let's hope they're friendly. Before Cirrus could reply, a warning light flashed on the pod's control panel. A loud beep filled the cabin. Cirrus's eyes widened. No, they found us. The sky becomes the battlefield. The pod burst out of the tunnels, emerging into the open night sky of the Valeri capital. The city below stretched endlessly, glowing with golden lights and towering spires. But Elias wasn't looking at the city. His eyes were locked onto the 3 Valeri warships hovering in the air. Their sleek, silver bodies reflected the moonlight. Energy cannons rotated toward the pod, preparing to fire. Elias gritted his teeth. You've got to be kidding me. Cirrus quickly grabbed the controls. Hold on. The pod veered sharply to the left, just as the warships opened fire. Bright blue energy beams sliced through the sky, missing them by inches. The pod shook violently as Cirrus pushed it to its limit, weaving through the city's skyline. Elias could see the streets below filling with soldiers. The Empress wasn't taking chances. She had sent everything after them. We won't last long in this thing, Elias shouted. Cirrus's fingers moved rapidly across the controls. We just need to make it to the outskirts. There's a hidden landing bay where the rebels hide their ships. Another explosion rocked the pod as a warship fired a missile. The shockwave sent them spiraling. Cirrus, I see it, she yelled, pulling the pod upward at the last second. The missile grazed their hull, sending sparks flying. Elias clenched his jaw. If they took one direct hit, they were finished. Then suddenly, a new energy blast streaked across the sky. But it wasn't aimed at them. It struck one of the Valeri warships instead. Elias's eyes widened as he saw 3 unknown fighter ships speeding toward them. Their dark metallic hulls bore no Valeri symbols. The rebels, Cirrus breathed. A voice crackled through the pod's communicator. Follow us if you want to live. Cirrus didn't hesitate. She turned the pod sharply, racing toward the rebels as they cleared a path through the enemy forces. The warships behind them struggled to keep up, but the rebels were faster, deadlier. Within moments, they had blasted open a route through the city's defenses. There, Cirrus pointed. A hidden landing platform emerged from the side of a mountain outside the city. The pod's engines roared as they dove toward it, just as another missile shot past them, exploding against the rocky cliffs. The impact sent debris flying, but Cirrus kept the pod steady. They raced into the landing bay, and the heavy doors slammed shut behind them, just as the warships outside fired their cannons. The energy blast struck the mountain instead, sending rocks tumbling. But Elias and Cirrus were safe, for now. A dangerous alliance. Elias stumbled out of the pod, his legs shaking slightly from the intense flight. He looked around. The landing bay was large but hidden, built into the rock itself. Rebel fighters stood around them, armed and watching closely. A woman stepped forward. She was tall, with sharp, intelligent eyes and short silver hair streaked with black. Unlike most Valeri, she didn't wear elegant robes. She wore armor, built for battle. Cirrus Valthera, she said, folding her arms. You finally decided to betray your mother. Cirrus sighed. It's good to see you too, Captain Rena. Elias stayed quiet, watching the 2 women. There was tension between them, but also familiarity. You led the entire empire straight to us, Rena said, her tone sharp. I hope whatever you're planning is worth the risk. Cirrus lifted her chin. It is. The lie needs to end. Rena narrowed her eyes, then glanced at Elias. And the human? He saved my life. Ceres said simply, "and he knows the truth." Rena studied Elias for a long moment before nodding. "Then we don't have time to waste." She turned to her people. "Prep the ship. We leave immediately." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Where exactly are we going?" Rena smirked. "To the heart of the Empire." Elias exchanged a glance with Ceres. They had escaped the city, but the real battle was only beginning. As the rebels prepared their ship, Elias knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was about to change forever. Elias stood at the edge of the rebel ship's loading bay, watching as the Valeri capital disappeared behind them. The city's golden towers shrank in the distance as the ship's engines roared, propelling them deeper into space. Beside him, Princess Ceres looked tense. She had finally turned against her mother, the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. And now, they were flying straight toward the heart of the Empire. Elias glanced at Captain Rena, the leader of the rebel faction. She stood at the command console, her sharp eyes scanning the star charts. "You still haven't told me where exactly we're going," Elias said. Rena smirked. "We're heading to Vale Thal, the Empress's personal station." Elias frowned. "And why would we do that? Isn't that the most dangerous place we could possibly go?" Ceres stepped forward. "Because that's where the Vault of Truth is hidden." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Vault of Truth?" Ceres nodded. "It's where the Empire stores its most dangerous secrets, records that have been erased from history, forbidden knowledge that could change everything." Rena leaned against the console. "And inside that vault is the final proof we need, the records showing that the Valeri came from Earth, that they are not superior beings, but just another branch of humanity." Elias exhaled. This was bigger than he had imagined. If they could get that proof, it wouldn't just be a theory or a rumor, it would be undeniable truth. "And you think we can just walk in and take it?" Elias asked. Rena grinned. "Not exactly. That's why we need a plan." The infiltration plan. The ship entered hyperspace, the stars stretching into long streaks of light. Rena gathered the team in the briefing room. A hologram of Vale Thal Station appeared in the center of the table. "The station is heavily guarded," she explained. "It's surrounded by a fleet of warships, automated defenses, and an elite unit of the Empress's personal guards." Elias crossed his arms. "Sounds impossible." Rena smirked. "Almost." Ceres pointed at the hologram. "There's an old docking port here, in the lower sector. It hasn't been used in years, but I still have access codes. If we get in through there, we can reach the vault undetected." Elias raised an eyebrow. "And if the codes don't work?" Rena shrugged. "Then we improvise." Elias sighed. "Great, just another suicide mission." Ceres placed a hand on his shoulder. "If we pull this off, Elias, we won't just be running anymore. We'll be fighting for something real." Elias met her gaze. He saw the determination in her eyes, the same fire that had led her to turn against her own mother. He nodded. "All right, let's do this." Arrival at Vale Thal. A few hours later, the ship dropped out of hyperspace, and Vale Thal Station loomed before them. The station was massive, floating in the darkness of space like a giant metal fortress. Its sleek silver surface reflected the glow of the nearby star. Dozens of warships hovered around it, patrolling like hungry predators. Elias whistled. "That's a lot of firepower." Ceres took a deep breath. "Let's hope my codes still work." Rena piloted the ship toward the hidden docking port. As they approached, Ceres activated the access panel and entered the old security codes. The team held their breath. For a few tense seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a quiet beep, the docking port opened. Ceres smiled. "We're in." Rena guided the ship inside, landing smoothly in the dark, abandoned port. The moment the doors sealed behind them, the rebels jumped into action. "Move fast," Rena ordered. "We don't have much time before someone notices us." Elias followed Ceres as they stepped onto the cold metal floor of the station. The air was still, filled with a faint hum of energy running through the walls. "This place feels empty," Elias muttered. Saris frowned. "That's what worries me." They moved quickly, making their way through the shadowed corridors. The station was massive, but Saris knew the way. After several minutes, they reached a large security door. Beyond it lay the Vault of Truth. Saris pressed her hand against the scanner. The system scanned her DNA, then flashed green. Access granted. The door slid open. Elias stepped inside and froze. The room was massive, filled with ancient records, holograms, and data storage devices. But at the center of the room, standing between them and the vault, was the Empress herself. The Empress's trap. Elias's heart pounded. The Empress stood tall, her golden robes flowing like liquid light. Her piercing violet eyes locked onto Saris. "My daughter," the Empress said softly, "you have made a terrible mistake." Saris tensed. "No, Mother, you made the mistake by keeping the truth hidden." The Empress sighed. "You always were too curious. Too much like your father." Saris clenched her fists. "He believed in truth. That's why you had him killed." Elias's breath caught. Saris's father was murdered by the Empress. The Empress's expression didn't change. He was weak, just as you are now. She turned to Elias, her eyes studying him. "And you, the human who has corrupted my daughter's mind." Elias glared. "She made her own choice." The Empress sighed. "A pity." Then, with a flick of her wrist, she activated a hidden alarm. Instantly, guards poured into the room, weapons drawn. Elias raised his blaster, stepping back toward Saris. "Well, this just got worse." Saris's eyes burned with determination. "We're not leaving without the truth." Rena's voice crackled through the communicator. "We've been spotted. We need to move. Now." The Empress smiled coldly. "You will never leave this station alive." Elias tightened his grip on his blaster. They were trapped, outnumbered, but he wasn't giving up. Because now, the fight for the truth had truly begun. Elias gripped his blaster tightly, his heart pounding. The Empress's personal guards surrounded them, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. At the center of it all, the Empress stood tall, her golden robes shimmering under the vault's dim lights. Saris stepped forward, her face filled with defiance. "You can't stop the truth, Mother. The galaxy deserves to know." The Empress sighed, her violet eyes cold. "The galaxy doesn't need chaos. It needs order." She raised her hand, and the guards took a step closer. Elias's fingers hovered over the trigger. He had faced danger before, but this was different. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to change history itself. Then, suddenly, the entire station shook violently. The lights flickered, and a loud explosion echoed through the halls. Rena's voice crackled through the communicator. "We're under attack." The fleet just opened fire on the station. Elias's eyes widened. "Wait, the Valeri fleet is firing on their own station." Saris looked at her mother in shock. "You would rather destroy everything than let the truth be known." The Empress's expression remained calm. "If I must." Before anyone could react, Elias fired his blaster. The energy bolt hit the floor near the guards, sending sparks flying. "Run," he shouted. Saris and Elias dove behind a control panel as the guards opened fire. Blue energy blasts streaked across the room, scorching the walls. Saris tapped rapidly on a nearby console. "I'm downloading the vault's data. Just hold them off." Elias ducked behind cover, firing back at the guards. Rena's voice came through the communicator again. "You need to get out of there. We're coming in." The ground shook again as another explosion rocked the station. Elias gritted his teeth. They were running out of time. Escape under fire. Saris let out a sharp breath. Download complete. She grabbed the small data drive and shoved it into her belt. Elias fired a few more shots before grabbing her arm. "Then let's go." The two of them raced toward the exit, dodging enemy fire. The Empress stood motionless, watching them flee. Ceres hesitated for a split second, looking back at her mother. "You could still help us," she said, her voice almost pleading. The Empress simply shook her head. "No." Ceres clenched her jaw. Then she turned and ran. They burst out into the hallway just as Rena and her rebel fighters arrived. "Go, go, go!" Rena shouted, covering them with blaster fire. The group ran through the station, alarms blaring around them. Through a nearby window, Elias could see the Valeri fleet attacking the station. Fighters streaked past, exchanging laser fire with the rebels. "They're trying to destroy the vault before we escape," Elias realized. Rena nodded. "Then we'll just have to be faster." They reached the hangar, where their ship waited. But just as they were about to board, more guards appeared, blocking the entrance. Ceres gritted her teeth. "They're not going to let us leave." Elias took a deep breath. Then an idea hit him. He turned to Ceres. "How do the station's defenses work?" Ceres blinked. "They're automated." "Why?" Elias grinned. "Because if we turn them against the fleet, we might just have a chance." Ceres's eyes widened. "That's insane." Rena smirked. "I like it. Turning the enemy's weapons against them." Ceres and Elias sprinted toward a control terminal near the hangar. Blaster fire rang out behind them as the rebels covered their escape. Ceres quickly hacked into the system. "If I can override the security, I can make the station fire on the fleet instead of us." Elias kept an eye on the guards approaching from the other side of the hall. "Better make it fast." Ceres's fingers flew over the controls. Suddenly, the screen flashed green. "Got it," she shouted. Outside, the station's turrets suddenly came to life. They turned toward the Valeri fleet and fired. Massive energy blasts streaked through space, hitting the warships directly. The fleet, caught off guard, scrambled to react. Rena whooped. "Now that's more like it." With the enemy distracted, the rebels rushed onto the ship. Elias pulled Ceres inside just as the engines roared to life. The ship blasted out of the hangar, weaving through the chaos. Ceres looked back at the station. "The vault. The truth. It's out now." Elias nodded. "We just started a war." A galaxy changed forever. As they soared into space, the station behind them erupted in flames. The Empress's forces had underestimated them. And now, the truth was out. Rena leaned back in her seat. "So, what's next?" Ceres looked at the data drive in her hand. "We take this to the galaxy. We show everyone the truth." Elias smirked and hoped they're ready for it. Ceres's eyes were filled with determination. They will be. As their ship disappeared into the stars, Elias knew one thing for certain. The Valeri Empire would never be the same again. The rebel ship soared through hyperspace, leaving the burning station far behind. Inside, the crew sat in silence, the weight of their victory still settling in. Elias leaned against the cold metal wall, watching Ceres as she held the data drive tightly in her hands. That small device held the truth, the proof that the Valeri were not superior beings, but just another branch of humanity. And now, the entire galaxy would know. Rena broke the silence. "So, where do we take this?" Ceres looked up, her eyes filled with determination. "To the Galactic Council." Elias frowned. "That's a risky move. The Council is controlled by the Valeri. If we walk in there, we could be executed before we even speak." Ceres nodded. "Maybe. But if we broadcast the truth to the entire Council, in front of every species, they won't be able to hide it anymore." Rena smirked. "I like the way you think, Princess." Elias sighed. "I have a bad feeling about this." But deep down, he knew it was the only way. The Galactic Council. 2 days later, the rebel ship dropped out of hyperspace, approaching the massive Council station, a colossal structure floating above a gas giant, home to the leaders of hundreds of civilizations. As they landed, Cirrus disguised herself in a simple cloak, hiding her identity. Elias and Rena walked beside her as they entered the grand halls of the council. The chamber was huge, filled with alien ambassadors of every kind. Tall, scaled creatures, beings made of living energy, and of course, the Veilari representatives, sitting high above the rest. At the center of it all sat the High Chancellor, an old, wise-looking alien with deep blue skin. He raised a hand, calling for order. "The council is now in session." His voice echoed through the hall. "State your purpose." Cirrus took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I am Cirrus, daughter of Empress Velora of the Veilari Empire." A wave of whispers spread through the room. The Veilari representatives sat up straight, their eyes narrowing. Elias tensed, his hand hovering near his blaster. This could turn bad very quickly. Cirrus continued, "I come with proof of a great lie, one that has shaped the galaxy for thousands of years." She lifted the data drive. "This contains records that the Veilari erased, proof that they are not gods, not superior beings, but descendants of humanity. Just like Earth." A stunned silence filled the chamber. Then one of the Veilari representatives stood angrily. "Lies. This is treason." Cirrus didn't flinch. "If it's a lie, then let the council see for themselves." She placed the drive into the council's central database. A massive hologram appeared above them, displaying ancient records, genetic studies, and the truth of the Veilari's origins. The room erupted into chaos. Some ambassadors shouted in shock, others in anger. The Veilari representatives looked furious, their golden eyes burning with rage. The High Chancellor raised his hand again. "Enough." His gaze turned to Cirrus. "These records, they are authentic." The Veilari leader slammed his fist on the table. "This information is dangerous. The Veilari have ruled for centuries. Our authority must not be questioned." Cirrus stepped forward. "You do not rule by right. You rule by fear and deception. That ends today." Elias braced himself. He could feel the tension rising. This was the moment everything would change. The fall of the Veilari Empire. The High Chancellor stood. "The Council will not stand for deception. The Veilari Empire must answer for its crimes." A roar of approval filled the chamber. Several species who had once been too afraid to oppose the Veilari now stood together. The Veilari leader growled in frustration. "You will regret this." But before he could react, security forces moved in, surrounding the Veilari representatives. Cirrus exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. It was over. The truth was out. The Veilari Empire, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, was now falling apart. Elias looked at Cirrus. "So, what now?" Cirrus smiled for the first time in days. "Now we rebuild. A new beginning." In the days that followed, the galaxy changed forever. The Veilari lost their control as more civilizations rose up against them. The Empress disappeared, vanishing into deep space. As for Cirrus, she refused to take her mother's throne. Instead, she helped form a new alliance, one built on truth and equality. One evening, Elias stood on the balcony of a rebel outpost, watching the stars. Cirrus joined him. "We did it," she said softly. Elias smirked. "Yeah. And now, the real work begins." She looked at him. "You could stay, you know. Help build something better." Elias chuckled. "Me? I'm just a guy who walked into the wrong room and saw a princess's secret." Cirrus laughed. "And now you've helped change history." Elias nodded. Maybe he wasn't just some lost human anymore. Maybe he had found his place in the galaxy. Together, they looked up at the stars. A new future waiting to be written.